Welcome to another video on data to decisions. In today's video, we will be building a interactive line chart which will interact and respond to your selection of whether it's a quarterly or a monthly trend chart. So for example, if I change this to monthly, you will see that the x-axis changes to monthly and then the line becomes a monthly trend. And then if I wanted to go back to quarterly, you will see that it reacts correctly. This is all going to be based on monthly data of sales that we have. We'll be building this chart from scratch. Now let's get started. So here is the raw data we have. So we have the beginning of the month as a date value, and then we have the sales amounts. We need to first do is to make sure that we create a column of values which respond to the user selection, whether they want you quarterly or monthly chart. So for that, let me go ahead and first create. Let's say this is where the user is going to enter quarterly or monthly. So I can do a simple drop down by going to the data tab, data ribbon, validation, list. I can just type in quarterly or monthly, quarterly comma monthly, and now this is a simple drop down. Now this value, what the user chooses, should control what is the x-axis, right? So before we even get to the x-axis, so this is where let's say we want to create x-axis and y-axis values for our chart, but we want that y-axis and x-axis to be dynamic. So before we build that, we need to have a column in our raw data which we can use easily. So it'll be very clear when I explain when we take the next step here. But what I'm going to create is a simple formula to say if the user choice, which is in cell E3, let's lock the cell by pressing F4. If E3 equals quarterly, then what I want to be displayed here is the quarter number. So Q1 2023 is what I want. So in order to do so, I'm going to just do two quotes quarter for Q. And then I will do an ampersand. And then we have to come up with a quarter number. So the quarter number can be obtained by using a simple function roundup of this month of this value. So this month of January will be 1, right? So month of B5 divided by 3 because it's quarterly every 3 months. So we want to divide it by 3, rounding up to 0 digits. So this little part of the formula will give us back 1, which is Q1 quarter 1. When we go to April, it will give Q2, which will be second quarter. So let's test it out. But before we do that, let's just finish the formula. Round up of month of by 3, comma 0 gives us Q1, but we still want the year because we have multiple months or multiple years of data. So we want to get the year. So I'm going to do ampersand space. Space is just so that it's easy to understand. You don't have to put space. Ampersand. Now I want the let's say between the Q1 and the year, I want a dash. So I'm going to put dash and then ampersand. Now I want the year of the cell B5. Okay. This is all I want. So let's, before I complicate any further, I'm just going to do comma. If it's not quarterly, don't say anything. Okay. So now it gives you Q1 2023. So let's expand this and see if it works. So when it goes to April, what happens is this formula gives back Q2. And then you can see that we added the year at the end. So for the first 12 months, it puts the year and then it becomes 2024. So clearly this is working for quarter. But what if the user doesn't choose quarterly, if they choose monthly? Then we want the month to be displayed. So what I'm going to do is to go back to the formula at the end where we said blank. I'm going to change it to text um, of the cell B5, comma, double quotes. How do I want the month to be displayed? So let's say I say MMM hyphen YY. This is basically month and year. Then you do this double quotes and then let's close the formula with an close parenthesis and then update the formula. Nothing changes, and that's because we still have quarterly as the user selection. If I change monthly, now you see it's changing. So this is all we wanted to make sure that we do as a first step. The next step is to now build the chart data. So let's go and say unique of this values. Now, this will give me all the months, right? But what if I said quarterly? It'll give me all the quarters. So this is why we have to do it in two steps. And now you can hopefully understand what we're doing here. Quarterly and then monthly. X-axis is changing. Now, when the x-axis is changing, y-axis also has to adapt to it. It also, so instead of monthly sales, now it has to give me quarterly sales when it's quarterly. So how do I do that? Simple formula, SUMIF. The range that we are going to take is this. Let's lock it, comma. The criteria is for each data point. So I'm going to select F5, comma. What am I summing? The sales values. Lock it, close. So this will give me, let's test it out. So this gives me the monthly sales, right? So now, right now it's monthly. So this and this are exactly the same. But if I want it quarterly, now you see that it is changing. So it is okay. The only problem is you don't, I mean, I would prefer not to have these zeros here. So how do I do that? Instead of the formulas being, filled over everywhere or copied over, what you can do is to just say F5 hash, and this is the power of the dynamic arrays. So now I don't even have to enter the formulas anywhere. It is dynamic. This one is also dynamic because we remember that we did the unique function. We've done a lot of videos around that. So the unique function gives us a dynamic range. So when I change this to monthly, this automatically expands. This one also automatically expands. Wonderful. So this is exactly what we want to build a dynamic chart. So now we have this X and Y axis data. All we have to do is to create a chart. So they make it a little bit harder in Excel to do this step. I mean, I wish that we could just select them easily here. But what we need to do is to give a name to these two cells, which are holding the dynamic arrows, right? So I'm going to click on the cell F5 and go to define name. And in this case, I will put a hash at the end because it's a dynamic thing and give a name to this. So I'm going to just call it axis X is what I'm going to call this and press OK. And I will click on cell G5 and define the name. Important thing is to put a hash at the end and then I will call it axis Y. Okay, simple. So basically, you're giving names to those arrays, and now we can use them in the chart. So that's kind of the limitation within Excel. Let me click on a cell somewhere outside the data, and then I will go ahead and create a multi-line chart. Now I can go and choose the data I want. So right-click, select data. I'm going to choose a series name. In this case, we want sales, so I'm going to choose sales. But the data is going to come from here. And instead of just saying $G5, we actually have to say axis Y. Remember, that's what we named the y-axis values. So I have to do that. And then x-axis labels, you could do this, but we know that we have to use the dynamic. Sorry, we could do this, but we know that we want it to be dynamic. So instead, what we have to do make sure is after the sheet name and the exclamation mark, we will just type in axis X, which just like axis Y, we want to do axis X. So axis X is here, axis Y is there. Good to go. Now, let's test it out. This is monthly sales, and if I change this to quarterly, this changes and the chart also changes. So we can do, for example, we can change the x-axis label also instead of, for example, if this choice is quarterly, say quarter, otherwise say month. And in this, the whole scenario, I'm only dealing with like the data is monthly. I want to convert it also to quarterly. If you have more data, we can do year. So this formula that where I'm saying if it's quarterly, use this, otherwise month. And that's because there are only two options that I'm using in this scenario. But if you have more, we could write a longer formula to accommodate year, months, and all that. So now what we have done is to make this cell dynamic. So all I have to do now is to go to the data. Instead of the x-axis, I basically want this data to automatically change. So let's say I close this and I can add a text box. Actually, let's add a label, axis title. And this one, we know that it's the sales data, so y-axis. On the x-axis, there is a way you can make it dynamic. So I'm going to click on the text box, the axis title, and go here into the formula bar and say equals this cell. Okay. So now this text box, which is the x-axis label or a title, it's actually dynamic. So when we change this to monthly, you will see that this changes to month, the cell F4, which in turn means that the chart also gets updated. So let's try one more time. If I do quarterly, this becomes quarter and this also becomes quarter. So this is how you can build a dynamic chart. And again, there are steps you can do to make it more polished. Obviously, I'll do a lot more formatting on the chart. We have done that in the previous video, so I'm going to skip that here. Format your chart nicely and then make this as your interactive option on your output. All these other values don't have to be shown to the user. This can be the experience that your end user is going to go through. They don't need to say any of the data. All they have to do is, interact with the chart and change the label. So one thing we forgot was we can even add labels. Obviously, with a lot of data points, it is not going to be very friendly on the eye. But if you have fewer data points, definitely do the label. But what I want to show here is that when we change this quarterly, you'll still see the labels also are adapting monthly and the quarterly numbers. So hopefully this is a one of the many techniques that you can use in your report development or interactive reports and analysis. You can make the x-axis also dynamic and the y-axis respond to it also when you're plotting line charts. If you have any suggestions or feedback, please let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon in the next video.